Howdy everybody, this is Micah Darwin from Aspen Forge, and today I'll be showing you how I made this cross right here. I've had this specific design in mind for a little while now, and had seen something like it before, and a couple weeks ago got a chance to forge the first one. And pretty quickly I had several different blacksmiths asking if I could post a forging video of how I made this. So with that being said, hope you all enjoy the video, and let's get started. So basically the three pieces of steel that you'll need for this project are this piece of 8-inch long 3/4 square bar that'll end up being the stem, and then also these two smaller pieces of 3-inch long 3/4 square bar that'll end up being the crossbars. But we'll go ahead and start with forging the stem first. So right here you can see me starting to forge the smaller end of the taper on the stem. And the main reason for that for me is out of necessity, actually, because I currently don't have tongs in my shop that hold 3/4 square bar very securely. The ones that I'm using right now are ones that I made myself about a year ago, and while they do work, they're not ideal because the bits are kind of uneven, and you might see me struggle to hold onto the steel a couple times throughout this video. That being said, I do have a pair of 1/4-inch tongs that I bought about a year ago, hold 1/4-inch very well. And so one thing that I found works for me in making these crosses is to forge the smaller end of the taper first down to around about a 1/4-inch or so, so that I can really get a good grip on the steel with those 1/4-inch tongs, and then be able to do any other drawing out or upsetting that I need to do on the rest of the bar afterward. So you can see right here I switched to those 1/4-inch tongs. I got that taper pretty roughed in, and now I'm just drawing out the middle and top portions of the bar. And one thing that you won't see me do that most blacksmiths would in this step is forge over the edge of my anvil, draw out over the edge of my anvil. And there's a couple reasons for that. One being my anvil just doesn't have very good edges. That's just the way I bought it. I actually got it from a farrier who used it to shoe race horses. And over the course of the time that he used it, and I'm sure the many people before him, the edges chipped away, and they're just not very good. So I rarely forge over the edge of my anvil for that reason. But also for this project, the steel being the size that it is, it's not really necessary, at least for me. I found that it's just easier and more efficient for me to draw out over the face of the anvil rather than the edge, and not have to clean up those big valleys and dents that the edge makes. So that's why you won't see me draw out over the edge of my anvil in this video. So right here I'm starting to do the upset on the stem. I just kind of like a little flare at the top. It kind of adds some character. I didn't think about until after this video that it would probably be easier and more efficient for me long term to do this upsetting in a post vise rather than over the edge. Rather than over the face of my anvil. I do kind of like the control that I have on the face of the anvil. If I see the steel starting to bias towards one edge or the other, I can just really quickly turn it and look at it from all angles to see what I need to do with it. But as I'm making more of these, it'd probably be easier and more efficient to do this in my post vise instead, and just get a system down for doing it there rather than on the face of my anvil. So right here I'm just looking down on the steel from above, and if I see any dents or valleys in the steel, I'm just cleaning those up with some light hammer blows and making sure everything's straight, making sure everything's even before I move on to grinding the scale off. Alright, so here's the finished stem, nice and straight, nice and smooth, and with that we're ready to start on the crossbars. Now my apologies for this next camera angle. I didn't realize it's actually a little bit low, but you'll see that I cut about a 1-inch slot in the top of the steel with my angle grinder, and that just gives me an easy start for being able to spread those sides out that'll end up being riveted to the stem. And so in these next couple steps, basically all I'll be doing is spreading those sides with increasingly bigger chisels. I think I only used 2. And so spreading those out so that I can then continue to spread them over the edge of my anvil, and then lastly flatten them on the face of my anvil to be able to fit up really nicely and with as little gap as possible up against the sides of the stem. One quick note, I think it does help a lot to draw out these little shelves on the very end of the crossbar a little bit. Number one, I think it just looks better to add a little bit more of a transition and a taper that tapers into the stem, and it just looks better after it's all riveted together. But also it just gives a little bit more surface area for the rivet to be able to attach to. And so I draw these here out just a little bit, not much, but you can see they taper down to the end. And that'll end up looking quite a bit better once it's all riveted together. Right here I'm using this flat piece of steel that I have and hammering down on top of it just to get a really nice flat finish on the bottom of the crossbar. Alright, so we have all 3 pieces forged. Next step is to mark out the holes on the crossbars and for the stem, make sure that they're all aligned, drill those holes, and then start riveting. Since all 3 pieces are forged and finished at this point, I'm sticking them in the oven until they get up to temperature, and then I'll dip them in oil and put a black oil finish on them. Alright, now that all the pieces have a black oil finish on them, it's time to rivet everything together. The rivets I'm using are 1/4-inch round copper, which I found just look fantastic on these crosses and other small projects as well. They're extremely malleable, extremely easy to rivet, and they just look really good against the contrast of the black steel. So as I'm riveting these down, I'm constantly checking to make sure that everything's even, that the crossbars are fitting up nicely against the stem, and that there's an equal amount of rivet sticking out of either side of the stem.